any asset will be the present value of all its future economic benefits. Think about the logic. Today, I want to buy the chair. What is the value of this chair? Now, based on my estimation, I can use this chair for 3 years. Year 1, this chair will bring me $10 economic benefits. Year 2, $20. Year 3, $100. That's it. So from my perspective, 3 cash flows from this chair, right? $10, $20, and $100. If this is the case, I am able to work out the present value of all these 3 cash flows, according to what we learned last week. Do you agree? I will then have the present value of this cash flow stream. And that is the value of the chair. That's exactly how much we are willing to pay, isn't it? Does this make sense for you? Another example. Today, if you are willing to invest into a share, assume the share will only give you 2 cash flow, that's it. First cash flow, $1. Second cash flow, $2. That's it. After 2 years, assume the company bankruptcy, share price 0, nothing, so only 2 cash flows. How much money you are willing to pay for this share? The amount of money you are willing to pay for this share will be the present value of these 2 cash flows. Do you agree? Assume the present value of these 2 cash flows is $2.5. If this is the case, the right share price or the right value of this asset is $2.5. Do you agree? And that's how we value everything. Of course, in practice, if you are able to spend $2 in buying this share, which means you buy it underpricing, right? If you spend $3, that's overpricing. But the right price of this share should be $2.5 based on our analysis. And that's the concept of valuation. Everything, there's a price, even you and me. If you are able to know my future economic benefits, future cash flows, you can value me. Okay? If you are able to know the future economic benefits of an underlying investment, you then able to value these investments. You then able to know the true value of this investment today. You then compare how much money you actually need to spend in this investment. You then can make a financial decision. Does this make sense for you? And that's basically everything about valuation. So valuation is about cash flows, present value of cash flows. You have future cash flows. The value of the underlying asset will be the present value of all of future cash flows. Any questions up to this stage? Now, finance sounds very easy. In fact, this literature is called asset pricing in finance. What does that mean? Basically, this concept you can apply on everything. If you want to value any underlying asset, as long as you are able to identify its future cash flows and able to identify the correct discount rates, you then work out the present value. Any questions up to this stage? All right. As I told you guys in week 1, this lecture will be recorded, so I have to start on time. If you keep come out and come in, I can't teach. If you want to sit in this seminar next week, please make sure you attend the class on time. It's really distracting if people keep coming to the class and door shut on. Does this make sense for you? That's the only thing I'm asking you to do. Okay? Make sure you attend the class on time. This class is in 12 p.m., not 8 a.m. in the morning. All right? That's about valuation. Now, if this is the case, if you apply the principle of evaluation, if we want to value share, think about the future cash flows of a share. If you buy a share today, what kind of cash flows that you will have in the next 10 years or 20 years? Dividends, right? And possibly you will sell the share in 5 years' time. You sell the share, you have the share price, right? Which means, okay, if you are able to estimate your future dividends together with your selling price, for example, in 5 years, you will then be able to value the share, isn't it? Because the share essentially is a cash flow stream. with, for example, 5 dividends and 1 share price at the end. Do you agree? And that's the present value of share. Similarly, if you want to value an investment, all you need to do is to figure out the useful life of this investment, the life of this investment, and the annual cash flow of this investment. You then be able to work out the present value of the cash flow stream and the value of the project, isn't it? Do you agree? Okay. Now, what are we going to talk today? About bond. Similarly, if you are able to identify the future cash flows of a bond, you then work out the present value of all the future cash flows, sum them up. You then have the value of the bond. That's about valuation. That's everything in finance about valuation. Now, the principle theory sounds very easy, but in practice, it's very hard to apply. Why? It is very hard to apply on individual investments because everything are based on our estimation. You need to estimate future cash flows. You need to estimate discount rates. Because you want present value, you need discount rate, interest rate, right? But there's a lot of uncertainties in future. So how to overcome or solve this issue? And that is one of the central research questions in finance, but not in this unit. Now, how do we value bond, and what are the main valuation principles? After all of our discussions, as you can see, we then have the fundamental valuation model in these slides. And this model looks very familiar. If you still remember last week, we talked about mixed stream of cash flows, right? And when we talk about present value and future value of this mixed stream, and that's the equation, right? Do you agree? The present value of a cash flow stream will be the present value of all of its future cash flows. We discount each of them one by one. Am I right? If you look at this equation here, it looks scary, but if you look at the equation here, we have cash flow 1 to cash flow n. Am I right? We discount each of the cash flow back to today times 0. Do you agree? We then sum it up. We then have the present value of this cash flow stream. Am I right? That's what we learned last week. I told you guys fundamental approach, the stupid method, do it one by one, individual cash flows. And that's basically everything about valuation. You identify cash flow. If it is an annuity, good, use annuity equation. If it is not an annuity, okay, do it one by one. You identify the cash flow stream of an asset. Work out the present value of all future cash flows. That will be the right price value of the asset. Get it? Let's talk about bond and bond valuation. But before that, bond vocabulary. First of all, principle, very easy. Principle is the amount of money which interest is paid. So I am the bond issuer. You are the bond holder. I issue bond to you, which means you will pay me money. Give me a principal. Get it? You buy a bond from me. So you will hold the bond and I will have your money. In exchange, I need to pay interest. Does this make sense for you? Maturity date. The date when a bond's life ends and borrower must make the final interest payment and repay principal. I issue the bond. I am the bond issuer. You are the bond holder. I issue bond to you. I borrow money from you. Maturity 20 years, which means in 20 years' time, I need to repay the interest and the principal. That's maturity date. On the maturity date, I need to give you the last interest together with the principal. Par value. The face value of a bond, which borrower repays at maturity. In this unit, we always assume par value is 1,000. For each of the bond, there is a face value, par value. The par value is always $1,000. Okay, always $1,000. For example, today I issue a bond to her. She is the bond holder. If this is the case, for each of the bond, the par value is 1,000, face value is 1,000, which means on the first day when I initially issue the bond, if I issue 10 bonds to her, I will receive $10,000. Get it? If I issue 1 bond to her, I will receive $1,000. And that is the face value, the initial value of each of the bond. But the value of the bond might be different. I will explain to you why, okay? But at the very beginning, it will always be 1,000 when you firstly issue because the face value is 1,000. Does this make sense for you? Okay. Coupon. Coupon is very easy. Coupon is a fixed amount of interest that a bond promised to pay the investor. So I issue a bond to you. I issue the bond, you hold my bond. I borrow money from you. In exchange, I have to pay you interest. The interest for bond named as coupon. For example, today I issue a 5% annual coupon rate bond for 20 years to her, which means I issue 1 bond, face value, 1,000. Do you agree? 5%, which means every year I will pay $50 coupon payments to her. Do you agree? 20 years, which means 20 years later, I need to pay my last coupon, $50, together with the principal of the bond, 1,000. Do you agree? That's it. A last one, indenture. That's our contract. Okay? We need to sign a contract between you and me. Now, what is coupon rate? The 5%. Coupon rate is the rate derived by dividing the bond annual coupon rate by its par value. So if you know coupon payments, you know par value. Par value in this unit always assume 1,000 to make it easy for you guys. You get a coupon rate. If your coupon payment is 100, coupon rate will be 10%. Because par value always 1,000. And finally, there is something called coupon yield. Coupon yield is annual coupon divided by bond price. But this one, I will come back to this one later. Okay? Now, up to this stage, any questions? Let me give you an overall example. What is a bond? Today, I am the bond issuer. I decide to issue a bond to her. And you are the bond holder, which means I want to borrow money from you. I borrow $1,000 from her, coupon rate 10% for 20 years, which means every year I will pay you $10 coupon interest. Oh, sorry, not $10. 10% times 1,000, $100 coupon interest, right? For 20 years. At the end of the year 20, I will then repay your principal. Does this make sense for you? A typical debt item, just like you borrow money from the bank. Am I right? Now, I haven't finished yet. If this is the case, you guys have been wondering, hey Robert, we're going to spend the entire week to learn this? This looks like a very straightforward, right? In fact, it is not, because we need to learn how to price the bond. You then will ask me, hey Robert, why should we learn how to price the bond? The bond value is always 1,000. The bond value is 1,000, and that is the face value, not the market value, not the value of the bond according to the market condition. How long will she hold the bond? 20 years, right? During the holding periods, if you are the bond holder, you can sell or buy bond. Does this make sense for you? Because in most of the case, you may either not want to hold it for 20 years because it's too long, or you need money, or you want to generate a profit from a selling bond. You are then wondering, hey Robert, how? I'll give you guys an example. Think about it. Bond is like other financial instrument. There must be a price of the bond. Once you issue this bond, you hold the bond, and bond then turns to an asset. Such an asset will pay you future economic cash flows, coupon, and principal. If you know the discount rate, you will then able to discount the bond and work out the value of the bond, isn't it? Let me say it again. At the very beginning of the class, I am talking about how to value an asset. The value of any asset, or the true value of any asset, is the present value of all of its future cash flows. Do you agree? Similarly, if you think about bond, think about this example. She gets a bond from me, and she holds it for 2 years. 2 years later, now, assume it is today, she wants to sell the bond. What is the price of the bond? If this is the case, think about this financial asset. For this financial asset, it is a 20-year bond issued 2 years ago, so 18 years left. Am I right? This bond will give you 18 what? Coupon in next 18 years. Am I right? And this financial asset will also give you 1,000 par value at maturity. Am I right? So what is the value of this financial asset? The value of the financial asset will then be the present value of all its future cash flows. Do you agree? Am I right? Which means if you are able to work out the present value of all of the future 18 coupons, together with the present value of the bond at maturity, you sum them up, you will have the price of the bond, isn't it? Does this make sense for you? Now let me see my example again. So you are the bond holder. 2 years ago, you bought my bond. And today, you change your mind. You want to sell the bond. But you don't know the right value of the bond. You want to know the value of the bond before you sell it, right? Now, how to value the bond? From this lecture, you've learned, Herr Roberts, the value of any asset will be the present value of its future economic benefits or future cash flows. So my bond will give me 2 types of cash flow. The first type of cash flow, 18 coupon in the next 18 years. Am I right? Do you agree? The second type of cash flow, 1 lump sum at the end of year 18, $1,000 par value. Do you agree? To this end, from her perspective, the value of your bond will then be the present value of this 18 coupon, together with the present value of the par 1,000 at time 0. Do you agree? Which means if you are able to work out the present value of all these future cash flows, you will then have the value of the bond. Am I right? And that's it. Now, some students may realize, can you do it? Can you apply the knowledge we learned last week to work out the present value of those cash flows? Well, yes, we can. At the bottom line, if we know the discount rate, we can always use the fundamental approach. We discount each of the cash flow one by one, right? We have 19 cash flows put together, 18 coupon, 1 principal. Alternatively, it looks like coupon payments, they are equal periodical cash flows with constant time interval, last for 18 years. What is it? Oh, it is an annuity. So we may be able to apply the annuity equation, isn't it? That's good. Let's look at the bond valuation and bond price. After all of our discussion, the value or the price of the bond is actually the present value of coupon, together with the present value of my last principal payment. Do you agree? The present value of a coupon is actually a present value of an annuity, isn't it? Because you have fixed amount of coupon every year for 18 years. And present value of last principal is the present value of an individual cash flow. Do you agree? To this end, the price of the bond will then equal to an ordinary annuity, say coupon. Can you see that? Plus a single cash flow at the end of the maturity. Do you agree? And if you want me to write down an equation, the bond price will then be determined by the present value of this annuity and the present value of that single cash flow. Do you agree? And that's basically everything about bond. Now, if you are able to go back to your slides, last week's slides, you should also know the present value of annuity equation. And you should be able to know the present value of single cash flow equation. And you put them together, you will have the bond valuation equation. For this bond valuation equation, again, it looks very scary, but it's just a combination of the equation we learned last week. The first part of the equation is present value of an annuity, right? The second part of the equation is the present value of the par value. Any questions up to this stage? Any questions? What? What is what? Say. Coupon. C means coupon. C means your coupon payments. R is your interest rate. N is number of the coupon or maturity of the bond. Par value is always 1,000. So last term, par value is always 1,000. Price of each. Up to this stage, any questions? Okay, with this equation, let's go back to my example. Let's do this again, okay? So assume 2 years ago, she bought a 10-year bond or 10-year maturity bond from me at coupon rate of 10%. Today, she wants to sell the bond, but she wants to know the price of the bond. To this end, she knows the right price to sell, right? And from this unit, she learned that, okay, the price of the asset should be the present value of all its future cash flows. And then she did an analysis of the bond and realized that, okay, my bond will last for another 8 years. In the next 8 years' time, my bond will give me 8 coupon payments, equal periodical cash flows, with same time interval. Am I right? Together with 1 par value at the end of year 8. Once you have all the information, you're then able to work out present value of the bond. Because the present value of the bond will then be equal to the present value of these 8 cash flows, plus the present value of the par value. For these 8 coupon payments, it is an annuity, ordinary annuity, right? We can apply our present value of our ordinary annuity equation. For the last par value, it is a single cash flow. We can apply the present value of a single cash flow equation. Sum them together, we have the price of the bond. Does this make sense for you? Does this make sense for you? Huh? Any questions up to this stage? Any questions? When you work out the present value, your discount factor is always the discount rate, R. Can you see that? I will come back to the interest rate or discount rate later. Discount rate, interest rate, they are the same, right? I will come back to that interest later. I will ask you a very good question. Let's see one example about bond valuation. On 1st of January, the company have outstanding bond with coupon rate of 9.125% and face value of 1,000. Whether the question tell you or not, face value always 1,000, okay? For bond, always 1,000. Question. 9.125%, face value 1,000. How much is your annual coupon payments? Quick. How much is your annual coupon payments? $91.25. Am I right? Good. At the end of each year, this bond will pay you $91.25 in interest. And it matures at the end of 2020. Assume a return of 8%. Return of 8%, which means discount rate 8%. R is given. The bond have 2 types of cash payments. and 11 years of maturity, and a lump sum of 1,000 at maturity. So what is the price of this bond? The price of this bond is determined by the next 11 coupon payments. Am I right? Together with 1 par value payment on maturity. Do you agree? So the value of the bond will then be equal to the present value of the 11 coupon payments, together with the present value of this single cash flow at the end of year 11. Do you agree? So the value of the bond will then be the present value of this annuity, together with the present value of this single cash flow. This annuity is an 11-year annuity, equal amount of cash flows, $91.25, equal time interval, lasts for 11 years. Apply the ordinary annuity equation. You work out this bit. Do you agree? Together with present value of single cash flow, 1,000 discounted by 11 years. To this end, that's how it looks like. Let's look at this graph here. We have 11 cash flows, annuity. This bit here, right? And 1 single cash flow, 1,000 at the end of year 11. You sum up these 2 bits, you have the price of the bond. What is the price of the bond? $1,080. Look, $1,080. It looks like the price of the bond is higher than its issue price par value, isn't it? Can you see that? I will tell you guys why, but you can think about it. Why? Let me ask you guys a question. I will come back to that question later. I told you, in this unit, we always assume at the beginning when issue bond, face value 1,000, right? So that's an agreement between you and me. The question is why later on you can either sell the bond at a higher price or lower price. Think about it, why? There must be a reason. Okay. Very good market condition. It's highly correlated with market condition, but further, to what extent, why? Yes? Very good, very good. I'll come back to that point later, very good. Okay, let's move to the solution by using annuity equation. Again, as I told you guys last week, a lot of students complaining in this unit have a lot of equation. In fact, we do not have a lot of equation. We have all the equations last week. Rest of the week is just combination of the equations. Like what you have here for the bond valuation. The first part of the equation, what is it? The first part of the equation, it is a present value of an ordinary annuity. Am I right? The second part of the equation, what is it? Present value of a single cash flow, M at maturity, principal, isn't it? And the second cash flow is very easy because it's always 1,000 discounted by number of years. Is it hard? That's why I told you last week's topic is very important. Spend some time on last week's topic. Once you are on top of last week's knowledge, rest of the weeks are very easy for you. Especially for those kind of valuation. We are applying what we've learned last week. Up to this stage, any questions? Any questions? Good. Okay. Now, yield to maturity. Now, yield to maturity is the discount rate in bond. In short, what is yield to maturity? You don't have to read the slides yet because I need to give you a story. Do you guys still remember last week when we were talking about interest rate? R here. When we talk about future value, we name this as interest rate, right? When we talk about present value, we name this as discount rate because it's a discounting process, right? In bond valuation, it has another name called yield to maturity. Don't ask me why. These people just give it different names. Because when they initially created the financial item, they want to create a very innovative name. But they are the same. Get it? Now, let me ask you guys a question, the funny one. Back to my question, and you are right. Let me see my question again. Initially, you and me, we have a deal. I borrow money from you, I issue a bond to you. Face value of the bond, 1,000. That's the agreement between you and me. On the issue date, the face value must be the price of the bond, 1,000, right? Because you give me 1,000, I give you the bond. That's the price. And then we have an agreement. In the next 10 years, every year, I will pay you 10% coupon rate, $10, right? My question is, if this is the case, why 2 years later that you may able to sell the bond above the issue price, or sometimes maybe below the issue price? Why? You're very good, he said, market condition. And he said very good because he said there must be something between coupon rate and market discount rates. Let me tell you the reason. First of all, market condition changes. What happened? 2 years later, assume the market condition changed. We now have a better market. Once we have a better market, please note that other companies or similar type of companies in the market, they are continuously issue bond as well. Am I right? 2 years later, a similar company in the market issue a bond. When you initially issue the bond, of course, price is still 1,000. Do you agree? But because the market condition is good, you offer a 12% coupon rate. 12%. Now think about it. The new bond offer 12% coupon rate, everything else being equal. The old bond, what happened? Only offer 10% coupon rate because it is an old bond, isn't it? If the new bond offer 12% and the new bond sell for 1,000, am I right? For this old bond, are you still able to sell 1,000? Can you? You can't, because if you sell 1,000, no one got to buy your bond. Because if I have 1,000, I will always go for this bond, isn't it? Do you agree? If this is the case, you have to sell your bond at a discount price. Isn't it? You have to sell it at a lower price. How do we determine the price? Listen carefully. The new market coupon rate now become your discount rate, yield to maturity. And that's how we have the discount rate R. The new market yield to maturity, that rate, now is your discount rate R. Your coupon rate is always determined by your coupon price is always determined by your coupon rate. But in that bond valuation equation, your discount rate, yield to maturity, is determined by the new market rate. Does this make sense for you? If, as you can say, if the market have a higher rate, you have to sell your bond at a cheaper price. So your bond price will be below 1,000. Alternatively, think about this example. 2 years ago, 10% coupon rate. Now, today, we have a bad market condition. When we have a bad market condition, the newly issued bond only willing to offer 8% coupon rate. The newly issued bond offer 8% coupon rate, sell for 1,000, right? As an old bond, you are able to offer investor 10% of the return. Are you willing to sell at 1,000? You are the investor. Are you willing to sell at 1,000? Of course not. Look at this bond. Only 8% sell for 1,000. My bond, 10%. You want to sell it at a higher price. Do you agree? In this case, your coupon rate is higher than the market rate. The market rate is discount rate. You sell at a higher price. Does this make sense for you? Very good. Let's go back to our question. In our question, what is your coupon rate? 9.125%, right? What is the current market rate? 8%. Your rate is higher than the current market rate, which means you must sell your bond at the price which is higher than how much? 1,000. What is our answer? The price of the bond is $1,080. Can you see that? In bond valuation equation, to verify your solution is very easy. If the coupon rate is higher than discount rate, your bond price must be higher than 1,000. If it's not, you must be wrong. If your coupon rate is lower than discount rate, your bond price must be lower than 1,000. Do you agree? Okay. What about if your coupon rate is same as the market rate? How much do you sell your bond? At par value. Because your bond is indifferent from other bonds. Do you agree? If you can put the number into the equation, you can verify it if it give you the $1,000. Any questions up to this stage? Now, we can talk about this relationship summed up in these slides. Generally speaking, the yield to maturity on a bond selling at par will always equal to coupon rate. So if you are able to sell your bond at par value, 1,000, which means the discount rate, yield to maturity, and the coupon rate, they are the same. Am I right? When a bond coupon rate is higher than discount rate, what happened? Your coupon rate is higher than discount rate. You sell your bond higher than par value, which means you sell your bond at a premium. Does this make sense for you? Of course, if your coupon rate is lower than the market rate, you have to sell your bond for a cheaper price, which means you sell your bond at discount. Any questions? Any questions about this relationship? After my explanation to you, it is all up to you to spend some time to do some practice. Okay? Make sure that you do arrange time on this unit. I keep telling students this unit needs a lot of practice. I don't think the nature of the unit is hard at all. It just needs practice. And you need practice every week. Why? Because we have a lot of tasks for this unit. For example, as you all know, you now have your APCA homework, right? And unfortunately, next Monday you will have your second assignment. Because next Monday is week 4. So think about it. So there's a lot of tasks. And as you all know, as you can tell from here, the things we learned this week are all conditioned on last week's knowledge. Unfortunately, the things you learned next week will condition on this week's knowledge. And the things you will learn in week 5 and week 6 will condition on these 2 weeks' knowledge, etc., etc. And that's how this unit is designed. Just like accounting units. If you did accounting units, it will be the same. If you bring out the concept individually, it is not hard. But if you didn't spend your time across the trimester and you leave everything to the last second, 99% of the case you will fail the unit. Because too many things, right? If you leave income statement, cash flow statement, financial report, consolidation, all the stuff into the last minutes, you can't pass, no way. And that's how the unit is being designed. But if you learn all those income statement stuff like this one by one, you don't think it is hard. You think you are on top of everything. You need to practice, okay? Okay, example. We have tons of examples we can do together. We start from a premium bond. Premium bond means what? Your coupon rate must be higher than the market rate. That's why you will sell it at a premium, because your one is better. Very easy to understand, isn't it? So premium bond, you bought a 10% coupon bond last year at par 1,000, term to maturity 5 years. This year, remaining term to maturity will be 4 years, isn't it? It's a 5-year bond. You bought it a year ago. Now, 4 years left. So 4 coupon payments left. This is my coupon payments. 4 coupon payments left. Now, if the market rate is 8%, Market rate 8% means what? Market rate 8% means today, a newly issued bond, this is newly issued bond, sell 1,000 will give you a coupon rate of 8%, right? Now your bond worth more because your bond offers 10%. Am I right? You are able to sell at a higher price. From this example, can you tell? Your bond is the one that pay 1,000 coupon. Am I right? A newly issued bond is the one that pay how much? $80. And they still sell for 1,000. To this end, today, your bond is more competitive and your bond can sell at a premium. How to work out the price of the bond? We apply bond valuation equation. C is the coupon payments, 100. Am I right? R is the interest rate, yield to maturity. Interest rate yield to maturity is 8%. Am I right? Because that is the current market rate. How many years left? 4 years, right? So this is your present value of annuity equation. And of course, never forget about your last individual cash flow. I put them together. What is the price of the bond? 1066, which is higher than 1,000, which is expected. In exam, if you have such calculation and your answer is 966, you must be wrong. Because you must sell at a premium. Okay? So when a bond coupon rate is higher than yield to maturity, your bond sell at a premium. Any questions? Okay. Now, similarly, what about discount bond? Today, remaining years, 4 years, your bond still 100. But we now have a good market condition. The market rate, 12%. Market rate 12%, so newly issued bond that only sell for $1,000 will offer 12% return. Unfortunately, your bond only offer 10%. What happened? Your bond is less attractive. If you want to sell your bond, you have to sell it at a cheaper price. Isn't it? Market rate 12%, and the market sell 1,000. Your bond rate is only 10%. Your bond is less attractive. If you want to sell it, you have to sell it at a lower price. To this end, you perform the calculation. Coupon rate, 10%, so coupon payment 100. Now discount rate is 12%, yield to maturity. Number of years is 4, bond price $939. So you now sell your bond at $939. Up to this stage, any questions? Is it hard? Okay. That's basically everything about this week's calculation, bond valuation. The rest of them is all about practice, but there's nothing new. Of course, I will talk about semi-annual bond, but just a variation of the original equation, but nothing special. Same concept. Now, in these slides, I'll sum up the relationship again for you to give you a better idea. You can always refer to these slides if you are not sure about the price of the bond. Generally speaking, when interest rate, market rate, is higher than bond rate, which means your bond is less attractive, you must sell at a discount. If the market rate is lower than bond rate, which means your one is better, you must sell at a higher price. Back to many years ago, students always get confused about this relationship because you are trying to memorize it. When you're trying to memorize it, it's very easy for you to get confused. Don't try to memorize it. Think. Use your logic. If market rate is higher than coupon rate, market is better, your one is less attractive, you still want to sell it. Of course you sell at a lower price. If market rate is higher or is lower than your rate, your one is better. You don't want to sell at market price. You want to sell it more. So easy to understand. So think about the logic. But if market offer the same rate as your coupon rate, okay, sell the market price, which is par. You don't sell it at premium. You don't sell it at discount. You sell at market price. Does this make sense for you? Okay. Generally, the greater the uncertainty about asset future, excuse me. Generally, the greater the uncertainty about an asset future benefits, the higher the discount rate investor will apply when discounting bond. Now, what does that mean? I'm just give you an example. But in practice, as you can see, you are only able to know the rate of the market condition right now. But bond is a long-term asset, isn't it? All those knowledge I am giving you here just for you to understand the theory and the simplicity of calculation. But practice is much more complex. In practice, when you're trying to estimate future yield to maturity discount rates, you need to consider a lot of other factors, not just the current market condition, but also, listen carefully, the length of the bond. Because the longer the maturity, the higher the uncertainty. Isn't it? Everything else being equal. For a bond that have 4 years maturity, compared to a bond that have 30 years maturity, the second one have higher risk because higher uncertainty. And you may want to put higher discount rate on that bond. Okay? Not only the market condition currently, but also the time. Time matter. Does this make sense for you? All right. Now, up to this stage, before we move to these very scary slides, any questions? Last week, at the last, what we've learned, compound more frequently than annually. Am I right? I'll give you an example, compound more frequently than annually. I hope you can do this example together with me. Very easy example. Today, I put $100 into the bank. Annual interest is 10%. If it's compound annually, what is my future value at the end of the year? 110, right? If it's compound semi-annually, what should we do? We have a M, compounding frequency, which equal to 2. Do you agree? We need to divide our interest rate by 2. R divided by M. Do you agree? And then we need to times N by M. Do you agree? So to work out the future value, it will be 100 times 1 plus 10% divided by 2 to the power of 2. Am I right? Apply the intuition into this equation. We then have the semi-annual equation. Very easy. I will explain it step by step. How to apply it. In practice, why we have the semi-annual coupon payment? Annual coupon payment means it's happened annually. But in practice, if you really become a bond holder, you hold the bond, you will realize the bond issuer will normally pay you coupon semi-annually, every 6 months, which means it's compound twice a year, isn't it? The compounding frequency M will be 2. Am I right? If this is the case, what should we do to our bond valuation equation? Because now it is compound every 6 months. Your each coupon payment now will be your annual coupon payment divided by 2. Am I right? Because now it's compound every 2 months, you need to divide your interest rate by 2, by M. Am I right? Because it's compound twice a year, you need times N by M, times N by 2. Do you agree? Similarly, you divide R by 2 times N by 2. That's it. Is it hard? Just apply our compounding more frequently than annually approach. You divide interest rate by M times N by M. But don't forget, now your interest payment, coupon, is your semi-annual coupon payment. It's C divided by 2. For example, coupon rate 10%, par value 1,000. Annual coupon payment will be 100, right? But if this bond is a semi-annual bond, for each of your coupon payments will be $50. You need to divide it by 2. Does this make sense for you? Again, this equation will be provided in your formula sheet. But even without this equation, you can always derive it by yourself, isn't it? Just divide it by m. And of course, times n by m. Let's do one example. Now, this example is in this box here. Valuing a bond. Par value is 1,000. Maturity 2 years. Coupon rate 4%. Discount rate 4.4%. Okay, first of all, discount rate 4.4%, coupon rate 4%. What happened? Is this a premium bond or discount bond? Your rate is higher or lower than market? Lower. So your one is less attractive. Your one is less attractive. What can you do? You have to sell it at a cheaper price. This must be a discount bond. If it must be a discount bond, the price of the bond must be lower than 1,000. Am I right? Okay. Now, the bond pays coupon semi-annually, which means 2 years maturity. We have 4 coupon payments. Am I right? You can either do it by using an annuity equation, or you can do it one by one. This is entirely up to you, because only 4 of them. Let's talk. If it's paid semi-annual, first of all, 4% coupon rate. How much is your annual coupon payment? $40. How much is your semi-annual coupon payment? 40 divided by 2, which will be how much? 20, right? And then compounding more frequently than annually. R divided by M for first cash flow. R divided by M for second cash flow. R divided by M third cash flow, and fourth cash flow, etc., etc. Can you do that? I didn't use annuity equation in this one just for illustration purpose. If you want, you can use annuity as well. Because coupon payments, you can apply the semi-annual bond annuity equation. Okay, let's do another example by using annuity equation, and let's do it together. Suppose a bond with a 10% coupon rate and semi-annual coupons. 10% coupon rate. How much is your annual coupon payment? 100. How much is your semi-annual coupon? 50, right? Okay, semi-annual coupon 50, that's good. 5 years to maturity. 5 years to maturity, N will be 5. M is 2. The total number of coupon payments will be 10, right? 5 times 2 will be 10. Yield to maturity, 6%. Discount rate, 6%. First of all, discount rate 6%. Annual discount rate is 6%. Our coupon rate is 10%. Is it good things for us? Okay, nice. Because our coupon rate is higher than market rate. The price of my bond must be higher than 1,000. So must be a premium bond. Okay. Let's see the price of the bond. The semi-annual coupon is $50. Periods 5 times 2, 10. Annual yield to maturity 6%. M is 2. How much is your semi-annual discount rate? 3%, right? You have all the number. Are you able to apply those numbers into the equation? This is your semi-annual coupon bond equation. C divided by 2 is $50. Am I right? R divided by 2 is 3%, because 2 is M. Am I right? N is 5, M is 2, 10 coupon payments. Similarly, you apply the same discount factor here. Perform calculation. Bond price, 1170. Is it hard? Do you understand? Any questions up to this stage? Look, you need practice. I'm pretty sure that all of you guys understand what I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure that you know this process, and you have the idea about compounding more frequently than annually. But what you need to do, without looking at the solution, when you have the question in front of you, you should be able to do it individually. That takes time. Trust me, you need practice. I'll give you guys a classical example. Okay, my partner, she's so annoying because I like to play basketball, but I'm pretty bad. And she likes to watch me play basketball. While I'm shooting the basketball, she always asks me the same question. It looks very easy. How come you can't make it? The basket is so big, you just can't make it. Finance is just like shooting a basket. You're shooting the basketball, it looks very easy, right? But if you try to make it, it's not that easy. Even you're shooting the basketball under the basket, it's not that easy. If you don't trust me, you can give it a try. You need practice. Sometimes you may be able to make the basket, by luck, coincidence. But you need consistency for your exam performance. Does this make sense for you? That's exactly what happened here. I go through the question together with you. It's just like we watch a video of shooting basketball. It looks very easy, what you need to learn, everything, but when you're actually trying to shoot the basketball, you need to make the basket consistently. That requires tons of practice. Does this make sense for you? And that's the difference. Okay? All right. Let's move to the next slides. Bond price and interest rate. Good news for you, start from this slide, no more calculation, except the workshop questions, okay? Time to maturity means bond price to par value. Generally speaking, what is the relationship between the bond price and par value? At the passage of time, the bond price tends to close to its par value. Why? Because if you compare two bonds, the first one mature in 1 year, the second one mature in 10 years. The second one have higher uncertainty, isn't it? For the first bond, 1 year to maturity, the price of the bond will be very similar to its par value because you have very limited uncertainty. Generally speaking, all of the economic analysts, they are able to predict or anticipate next year's economic condition with a reasonable estimation. Does this make sense for you? So the closer the bond to its maturity, the closer of the bond price to the par value. Does this make sense for you? Now, interest rates. Bond price and interest rate moves in opposite direction. They are inversely related, as you all know. Interest rate about market condition. Yield to maturity. Yield to maturity increase, bond price decrease because it's a present value. Am I right? Interest rate decrease, bond price increase. Does this make sense for you? So bond price, interest rate, they have an inverse relationship. Change in interest rate have a larger impact on long-term bond than short-term bond. For example, what does that sentence mean? Very easy to understand. We have two bonds in front of us. The first one mature in 1 year. The second one mature in 10 years. That sentence simply implies changing market condition, changing interest rates. The second bond is more sensitive to the movements of interest rates because the second one have higher uncertainty. Get it? Longer times to maturity, so it's more sensitive to the movements of interest. And the first one, because you only have 1 year to maturity, less sensitive to the movements of interest. So change in interest rates have larger impact on long-term bond than short-term bond. Does this make sense for you? So long-term bond is more sensitive to the movements of interest rate up and down because you have longer period of time to discount your future cash flows. But if you only have 1 year to maturity, you are less sensitive to the movements of interest rates. If you only have 1 day to maturity, change of interest rate will not affect your bond price at all because it matures tomorrow. Okay?
Even the nature of the bonds will affect also, like secure bonds, unsecured bonds.
The nature of the bond will affect what? The price of the bond? It will, but it's not in this scope. We're now trying to identify the components. The one you said is bond characteristics, which we'll discuss in the second half of the seminar. Okay, normally secured bonds sell at a lower coupon rate. Unsecured bond must issue at a higher coupon rate. And that's bond price and interest rate. So generally, inverse relationship. Interest rate goes up, price of the bond decrease. This can be told from the equation here, right? Your interest rate is at the denominator, right? Interest rate goes down, bond price increase, inverse relationship. Second, if you have two bonds in front of you, one is maturing in 1 year, another one maturing in 10 years, the longer the maturity, the higher the sensitivity of these bonds to change of interest rates. It is more sensitive of this bond to movements of interest. Example, as you can tell, the relationship between bond price and required returns for bond with different time to maturity but same 6% coupon rate. Can you see that? These two bonds, they have different maturity. One is 2 year and one is 10 year. But they have same coupon rate, 6%. Now, if you look at the horizontal axis, the horizontal axis is the discount rate. And the vertical is the price of the bond. Let's look at these two bonds. If the discount rate yield to maturity is 6%, what is the price of the bond? For both bonds, the price must be 1,000. Because for both bonds, what's the coupon rate? 6%, right? So for both bonds, when coupon rate is the same as discount rate, what happened to the price of the bond? It must sell at par value. Am I right? Now, question. If coupon rate is 6%, if discount rate is below 6%, what happened to the price of the bond? Must be higher than the par value, am I right? Because your bond is better. Let's assume the discount rate is 4%. What happened? When the discount rate is 4%, the longer maturity bond sell at $1,162. But the shorter maturity bond only sell around probably $1,050. What happened? The longer the maturity, the price of the bond is more sensitive to the movements of the interest rate. Can you tell that? The 10-year bond increased by larger magnitudes than the 2-year bond. Does this make sense for you? Similarly, if the interest rate is higher than coupon rate, what happened to the price of the bond? Must be lower than par value, right? But what happened if you look at the 10-year bond and 2-year bonds? The 10-year bonds, bond price decreased by a larger magnitude, isn't it? Because the longer the term to maturity, the price of the bond is more sensitive to the movements of interest rates, higher volatility, or higher sensitivity. Does this make sense for you? And that's the relationship of bond and interest rate. Bond price and interest rate. Notably, so far we've learned two important relationships. The first one is easy. The relationship between coupon rate and interest rate. Coupon rate higher than interest rate, premium bond. Lower than interest rate, discount bond. Same as interest rate, par value. That's a question about coupon rate and interest rate. This is a question about bond price and interest rate. Bond price and interest rate, first of all, inverse relationship. Second of all, the sensitivity of the bond price with the term to maturity. Why I mention this? Because previously in exam, I am asking questions. When I'm asking bond price and interest rate, students always give me answer about coupon rate and interest. This is not correct. I'm not asking you the relationship between coupon rate and interest. Don't get confused. Okay? Next slide, and then we have a break. We discussed this. Oh, we can have a break now, actually. Let's have a break, and then we move back to the slides. Let's have a 10 minutes break. Please come back at 20 past, okay? Principal is the amount of money of which interest is paid. Very easy. See, today, if I only issue one bond to you, the par value for this bond is 1,000. The principal is also 1,000.
Oh, the same.
Yeah. I haven't finished. And the interest payment is your coupon payment. If coupon payment is 10%, my coupon payment for each bond will be 100. That's it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Today, if I issue 10 bonds, the face value is 1,000 each bond. But the principal will be 10 times 1,000, which will be 10,000. For each bond, you will have 100 coupons. But put together, your total interest will be 1,000. That's reasonable. How do we calculate? If you know other information, you can look at market rates. If you know coupon rates, if you know the price that you can sell, normally what you can do, you go to the market, you look at a similar company, how much they sell their bond. With a similar maturity. If they sell for this price, you know a price. You know your coupon, you can then work out the R. But we have one question in your workshop, work out R, but you can't do it without using Excel and company, you can't do it. But I will let you know.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. My suggestion, so for week 1, there is a summary video. Before you start to do everything, watch my summary video, not for the accurate reporting. There is a summary video about an hour. Watch that video, because that video for the first 30 minutes, I explain everything what you need to do. Most importantly, I explain the steps of sign up FDR. So you need to watch that video. Yeah, after you watch that video, you should be on top of this. And of course, I have summary video for week 2. So if you want, you may want to watch both weeks. Okay, short video. It's all on Cloud Deep. It's on Cloud Deep. As long as you are able to find my first week's summary video, you watch that video. In that way, I explain how to get all the materials in the video. But ask your friends, see how to get the first week's summary video. That's short video. You think Cloud Deep on their resources. On the week 1.
Yes. What happened is like all the lecture will be recorded. So my first and second week's lecture is recorded. Second, every week I also prepare a summary video for all the students. So my suggestion, because you miss most of the week, right? My suggestion is if you go to Cloud Beacon and you click the resources button, so we have the weekly learning resources folder, right? If you click week 1 or week 2, there is called 2 videos. The first one is a summary video. Second one is called weekly summary video for cloud students, the short summary video. You watch the short one first. So my suggestion is you watch both videos. First week is about 15 minutes. Second week is about an hour. You watch both videos first. Especially the first week, please watch that video before you do anything. Once you watch these 2 videos, if you have or you need the further understanding about unit, you may want to watch the long version and other materials. But you should be fine after you watch the short one. So you will have a kickstart about how to do and also sign up the assessment or something. I explain everything. Watch the video. I explain everything step by step on both of the videos. So watch both of the videos before you do anything. Okay? So make sure you watch both of them before you do anything. All right? And of course, if you have questions, you send me email or ask online. But in the first week, I show students what to do and how to do it. Okay? Yeah. No worries. Yes?
Yeah. So if we have like water share at 8%,
Bond, not share bond. You bought a bond, not share bond, 8%, yeah.
So you have bought the like bond at 8% coupon rate, and the next year we see the market rate is 10%. So that means we are like at lower.
Yeah.
Level. So in like you told us that if we have a lower, we need to sell.
You don't need to sell. If you want to sell, you have to sell at lower price.
We can actually wait for the market conditions to get right.
You are right.
Yeah, it's all option, right?
But yeah, it's your option. But most of the
It's
cases,
better
it depends.
we should sell it and we buy another bond.
No, not really. It's hard to say. That's about buy and sell decision. Look, there's a lot of other things because the question we are talking about here are hypothetical, not reality.
Right.
But in reality, sometimes you may be forced to sell because you may have maturity or you may need money for something else.
Yeah.
You have to sell, or
They have
you need to rebalance your portfolio. Yeah, you need to rebalance your portfolio, something like this. What I'm talking here is like if you, of course, you can hold it till the market condition turns good. But if you want to
like
sell, you have to sell at a cheaper price. That's it.
I got it.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to our class. Settle down, please. Okay, 1, 2, 3, settle down, let's start. Okay, types of bond. Before we have the break, we learned all the calculation stuff and valuation. Now, the second half of the lecture will be more interesting because we centered on the theory part and something about the practice. Generally speaking, we have 2 types of bond. The first one is called corporate bond. The second one is called government bond. Corporate bond, usually with a par of 1,000 and semi-annual coupon. Corporate bond, generally speaking, we only name this as a bond if maturity is more than 10 years. If it's less than 10 years, we will name this as a notes. That's for corporate. Okay? Normally issued by corporate, and normally corporate bonds give you higher coupon rates. Because generally speaking,
corporate bond have higher risk. All right? Second, government bond. Government bond, I'm using US government bond as an example. Generally speaking, because we all following the US system, if it is less than 1 year, for such a bond, it's not named as bond, it's named as treasury bills. If it's between 1 year to 10 years, it is a note. Only when it is more than 10 years, it is a bond issued by the government. Generally speaking, bond issued by a government, we consider it as a risk-free asset, mainly used for risk-free rate or for portfolio balance to against the risk. Generally speaking, government bond, why it is risk-free? Because we can consider it free from risk because it is very safe. And that's the nature of the government bond. Why? Because if US government is the issuer, you are the bondholder, you hold US government bond. Unless US government bankrupted, otherwise you will definitely have your money back, right? The probability of US government bankrupted or insolvency is nearly zero. And that's why we consider it as a very safe asset, free from risk, no risk. So the US government bond rate is a risk-free rate. Because it is nearly free from risk, as you all know, when it is nearly free from risk, the coupon rate or return must be really low. I will show you guys, okay? Some of you guys may be wondering, Australian bond. If you are interested in Australian bond, those are the links that you can click and watch about Australian bond to give you a general idea. Australian bond rate is normally about 2% because similar like US government, the probability of Australian government default is very low, right? And to this end, Australian government bond can be considered as a risk-free asset as well, free from risk. It's like you invest into this bond, and you will have this kind of return, free from risk. You will not suffer any kind of risk. But notably, return from bond is very low. It's only about 2% per annum. Very, very low for Australian government bond or US government bond. Okay. For personal investors, my suggestion, we normally invest in bond in mutual funds instead of individual company bond or government bonds. Why? Because individual corporate bond is too risky because you put everything in one basket, right? If this corporate bankrupted, you just can't get your money back. Government bond, the return is too low, 2%. It's even lower than you put your money into the bank because the probability of the government default is lower than bank. So there's no point you put the money into the government bond. To this end, if you really want to invest into bond market, you probably want to buy a mutual fund. Mutual fund is a portfolio investment. They have portfolios, include different asset classes. If you are interested in a particular bond, you may want to invest in a mutual fund. And that's the general introduction about types of bonds. Now, we can also classify types of bond based on their features, like the question he asked before the break. First of all, the bond can be considered or classified based on their rates. It could be either fixed coupon rate bond or floating rate bond. Fixed rate bond means coupon rate is fixed, which is very easy to understand, right? But as we all know, because of the uncertainty of the market condition, if you issue a bond today at a fixed rate, to both issuer and holder, it is too risky and it is not reasonable, because if you hold the bond for the next 30 years, it is too hard for you to determine a rate today for the next 30 years, isn't it? To this end, we have something called floating rates. Floating rates, that is, it is a variable rate, not a fixed rate of the coupon rate. It is a variable coupon rate. The floating rate is determined by a benchmark rate together with LIBOR rate. Benchmark rate is a fixed component. LIBOR rate is the interbank exchange rate of all the London interbanks, central banks. Okay, a typical rate used in the market. So you have one variable components and one fixed components, and put together, it gives you your variable interest rate. And that's how we classify a bond based on fixed and floating. Of course, we can also classify a bond based on secured and unsecured. Unsecured bonds are backed only by general faith and credit of the issuer. So today, I issue a bond to you. Unsecured. As a bond holder, you have no choice but trust me. That's it. So this bond only backed up by the general faith or credit of the issuer, me. That's it. Secured bond, on the other hand, is a little bit different. Secured bond is backed up by the assets. Today, I issue a bond. This bond is backed up by the assets. In the occasion of default, as the bond holder, you are able to take this asset away from my company, like a property. Get it? Of course, if this is the case, as you can see, secured bond must offer lower coupon rate than unsecured bond because it's safer. The lower the risk, the lower the interest rate return, isn't it? Because it's safer. Does this make sense for you? Examples are mortgage bonds, collateral trust bonds. All those bonds are secured bonds. Mortgage bonds, on the event of default, the bondholder can take away the property, right? And that's about types of bond by features. Now, something very interesting that I would like to share with you. Students used to get excited when I move to the next one. Bond rating. Generally speaking, bond rating have different groups. We have two rating organizations in practice. The first one is S&P, Standard & Poor's. The second one is Moody's, large rating organization. And both of them, they are US investment consulting companies, okay? And of course, we do have ratings from JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs as well, but those are the most popular rating system. Generally speaking, highest quality normally means AAA, AAA. And then high quality normally means AA. Upper medium is A, and medium quality BBB. Generally speaking, if this is a government bond, most of the government bonds, good governments, with a credit rating above AA. So either AA or AAA. Okay? So for government bond, normally the benchmark is AA. If the government have a credit lower than AA, it is not really good government. If it is below A, went to B level, the credit of the government is a big issue. But we do have other examples I will show you, okay? For corporate bond, it is very hard for a corporate bond to have AAA or AA, nearly impossible. Because this AAA, AA means nearly 0% of probability to default. For corporate, it's nearly impossible. Okay, think about one example, because students used to ask me, hey Robert, today if Google or Apple, they issue a bond, are they AAA? No, they are not. And then they will come back to me, hey Robert, how come? I think Apple, there's no way Apple will be bankrupted or Google will be bankrupted. Not really. When I was at your age, the largest company in the world called Nokia. I don't believe Nokia went to insolvency. When I at your age, if you tell me that Nokia went to insolvency, that's impossible. How? And 2 years' time, they went to insolvency. In 2 years. Technology innovation. Okay? Things can change quickly. Company like Apple or Amazon, they may bankrupt in 1 year. Especially Apple. I don't really have a really confidence on Apple because they don't really have any innovation in the last 3 or 4 years. Because if you lack of innovation, the market will eliminate you really quickly. Okay? So for a large corporation, it is nearly impossible for them to have AAA or AA ranked bond because it's really hard to say that there's no low probability for default. All right. Now, for bond rating above BBB, they are in the investment grade. That is, if you talk to a consultant, they will suggest you to invest into this kind of bond. But if a bond rating below B, below BBB, we will consider those kind of bond as junk bond. Junk bond means bad bond, rubbish. Of course, for those bad bonds, if you're looking for higher return, you can still invest into this kind of bond. They offer you unbelievable higher rate. Sometimes the bond return coupon rate can be unbelievable, and you can't even believe it. Today, the US government bond rate is only about 2%. Australian government bond rate is 2% because the probability of default is so low, right? But do you guys know, in 1990, about 28 years ago, what is the bond rate in Australian market? 20%. 20% in Australia. Because of the credit, people just don't trust the government. Now let me show you the credit rating of the government, which is correlated with the credit rating of the bond. Where is it? Let me enlarge it. Can you see it? Can you see it? How should I enlarge it? Yeah, that's what I'm doing. It's not working. Control, yeah. Oh, it's too big. Where is it? It's gone. No? Just give me a second. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Okay, good, good. All right. I rated the bond based on their credit rating. Well, most of the country as expected, right? If you look at the AAA, you see Canada, you see Denmark, you see Germany, you see Netherlands, you see Norway, you see Singapore, Sweden, Australia. Expected, isn't it? And some of them, they fall into AA ranked. For example, Hong Kong and United States. And I think China is AA as well. Taiwan. And China is A+, oh, it's D ranked. But that's the government rating. But that's quite reasonable. So give you a general idea about the rating. If you see China, you see Japan, they are only A+. Okay? They are a large economic entity, but just people don't have really great confidence on their government. As you can see, their government rating is not that high. And of course, UAE is A. Spain, I'm surprised Spain is still A-, but Spain have pretty bad reputation. But anyway, those are the countries with A. Once the countries fall into the BBB rank, which is a bad signal, which means the company's credit is pretty low. If you look at those countries, it's kind of expected, right? Italy, Mexico, with all the due respect to the countries, they have low rating, which is expected. Now, students are always interested in those countries who have the worst rating. Who do you think in your mind have the worst rating? I can tell you it is not North Korea. So who do you think have the worst rating? Not great. North Korea government is actually not bad. Because do you believe North Korea government will be bankrupted? No, it won't. I'll show you. Now, those ratings, what is D and SD? D means default. Default means, for example, the second country, if you lend money to the government, 100% you won't get your money back. That means default grade, they will default for sure. They may change government every month. So they have a new government, and then they issue bond, give their money, and then next month you have a new government. So that's called default grade. They will default for sure. SD means selective default. Selective default means, like for most of the bonds, they will default. Okay, D and SD is like unbelievable ranking. And it's money happening in those countries with very bad political environments. And again, most of the countries, with all the due respect, are expected, isn't it? If you look at the country name, if you can identify some of them, it's kind of expected. But those are really bad ranks. Some of the students think about Greece, back to 5 years ago, yes, you are right. Greece, they used to fall in CCC ranked, okay? And Iceland used to fall in CCC ranked. And also Argentina. Argentina used to be very bad. And Argentina used to be in the SD category. Their government is not good as well. So all those kind of categories. But just give you a general idea. If you are interested, you can always Google it. But it's kind of expected. So give you a rough idea about the rating of the government, so you know the rough idea about the riskiness of the bond. Okay? So you can see, for example, China and Japan, they are A+, not AA, not AAA. But if you buy a Japan government bond, I think it's still safe. Okay, because I don't really think their government is going to default. Okay? All right. Let's move back to our lecture slides. Up to this stage, any questions? All right. Finally, before we move to the second bit of the slides, term structure and interest rates. We talked about bond price and interest rate. We talked about the coupon rate and the interest rate. Finally, a little bit things about term structure and interest rate. That is, what is the relationship between the interest rate and the maturity date or length of maturity? Generally speaking, yields on long-term security are higher than short-term security. So these slides mainly discuss the impact of time to interest rates. Very easy to understand. For example, your bond price is determined by coupon rate and discount rate, yield to maturity, right? Now, yield to maturity is determined by two components. The first one is market condition, as previously discussed. The second one is actually the length of the bond. Because the longer the maturity, the higher the uncertainty, the higher the yield. Does this make sense for you? Generally speaking, there is a yield curve. And the yield curve, the long yield, normally is higher than short yields. That is, for everything else being equal, the longer the maturity, the higher the yield. Get it? But we do have exceptions. The exceptions can happen in financial distress or global financial crisis. Generally, look at the first graph here. In the first graph, term to maturity is the length, time. Horizontal axis is the yield. The longer the maturity, the higher the uncertainty, the higher the yield. Upward sloping, am I right? But there is a possibility that is a flat, last one. Flat is like the longer the maturity, the yield does not change, constant. Possible for AAA ranked country. If you look at Canada, for example, if you look at Switzerland or Sweden, for those countries, their government 10-year bond and 20-year bond, the coupon rate roughly the same. Because to them, 10-year or 20-year doesn't make a big difference because we know the certainty of the government environment or political environment. Does this make sense for you? For Switzerland, a 10-year, 20-year, or even 50-year bond will have the exactly same yield. Why? Because the length or time of the maturity will not affect the yield at all because we trust their government or political environment. Does this make sense for you? All the central banks are in Switzerland. That's how it works. Now, a lot of students may run in the second graph, downward sloping. Under what kind of scenario, the longer the maturity, the lower the yield? It only happened in global financial crisis. In crisis period, the longer the maturity, the yield are expected to go low because you know the economic will be recovered in future. Does this make sense for you? I'll give you guys another example you can think about in this way, very easy. The reason that we have upward sloping at the beginning, because the longer the maturity, the higher the uncertainty, right? But think about it. If you now standing in the global financial crisis, you were already in the bottom. You can't be worse. Am I right? The longer the maturity, which means what? You know the economic will be recovered in future. Am I right? So the future is actually better than today. And that's why it's downward sloping. It only happens in financial distress and in global financial crisis. And that's generally the relationship. But in most of the case, it's always upward sloping. Okay? In most of the case, it's always upward sloping. Up to this stage, any questions? Any questions? Good. Now, let's move to the second bit of the lecture, other long-term debt items. So in the first part of the lecture, we spent most of our time on bond and the relationship between bond, interest rate, coupon rate, term to structure. Now, do we have other items as long-term debt? We use bond at the beginning as one of the typical example to represent the debt item. But in markets, we have many different debt items. The debt items can be classified as public issue debt item and private issue debt item. The public issue debt item, first of all, if it is public issued, means it must be registered with ethic, and it must be publicly available, and it must be with fixed offer rate or fixed rate of coupon rate. Public issue bond, for example, government bond, publicly issued. For example, large corporate bond. For example, today, BHP, they want to issue a bond to the market, and that is public bond, publicly available. Private issue, debt item. Private issue debt item, normally we won't name this as a bond. Private issue debt item, the name normally will be loan, bank loan. Get it? Not bond. Bond is normally a public issued, large one, corporate to corporate, bank to corporate. But private issued, between you and me, between you and the bank, between corporate and you, private issued. Most of the case, we name this as a loan, bank loan. Today, I borrow money from the bank. Today, your company borrow money from the bank. This is the bank loan. It is a private debt agreement with the financial institution. Only you and the bank know the detail of the contract, not publicly available. Okay? Investors may know the interest rate, but they don't know the detail. They don't know the conditions. They don't know the contract's conditions or terms in the contract. Get it? It's a private one between you and me. That's privately issued bank loan. Term of the loan or syndicate, it can be term loans or syndicate loans. Term loans is like, I lend money to you for 5 years. Syndicate loans is a syndicate. What does that mean? Syndicate loans, generally speaking, if you need money, you need, for example, 10 billion. I'm one bank. I don't have 10 billion. Even I do, I don't want to lend you 10 billion because it's too risky. So what happened? You may get a syndicate loan from a group of banks, ANZ, CDA, NAB, Bandigo, and private financial institutions of investment banks. 10 of them, put together, we have a syndicate loan. We lend money to you together. Get it? Because none of the individual organizations have such amount of money to lend it to you. And that is syndicate loan. A classical example, you guys have been wondering, which companies are using syndicate loan and why? Charleston. Charleston is built on syndicate loans. Okay? None of the financial institutions have enough money to loan Charleston individually. So they borrow money as a syndicate loan to diversify the risk as well. And that's how it works. Get it? And that's how it works for syndicates. Most of the case, private loan between you and me, we are using floating rates. But the detail of the rates won't be disclosed to the investor. I'm doing research in this area about liquidity of the loan and loan cost of the loan. Most of the case, unless you are able to see the contract, otherwise you don't know the detail of the interest rate. You have to do the calculation by yourself based on your estimation, but they won't show you the contract. Okay? And finally, there could be something called private placement. Private placement is very funny. It's basically, no one knows. Private placement is like you get money from a super wealthy investor. And this super wealthy investor, no one knows his identity. And no one knows the details of the contract. And that's private placement, just between you and me. A secret buyer or secret lender. Okay? And that's the type of the debt in the market. Now, as you can see, pros and cons. Private debt, from my perspective, large corporate nowadays, they prefer private debt. If they want money, instead of issue bond to the public, they want to borrow money from the bank, or they want to borrow money from a super wealthy investor because of privacy. Public debt, easier. to raising fund capital, right? But once it is go public, you have to disclose a lot of information about your company, purpose of using the money, and under very strict monitoring power from the government and from the shareholder and all the interesting parties. So that's the pros and cons. And that's why in most of the case, public issue debt, in most of the case are government bonds. Only government issue public bonds, okay? Any questions up to this stage? A classical example about corporate that may issue bond could be Microsoft. Microsoft, they issue bond. Okay? Could be Microsoft, can be one example. Now, loan covenants. We talked about private placement. We talk about that, okay, you and me, I'm the bank, you are the borrower, you can borrow money from me, we have the private loan, right? Once we have the private loan, we must sign a contract, right? In this contract, there are something called loan covenants. Do you guys still remember in week 1, I'll ask you a question, the bad CEO example. The bad CEO may do bad things, gambling, right? For his own benefits instead of debt holders' benefit, put bank in the risk. Debt covenants or loan covenants, it is the covenants that the bank or the financial institution use to protect themselves. That is, debt covenants, loan covenants, are contractual clauses with debt agreement that constrain borrowers' actions. If you want to use my money, you have to follow those covenants. If you breach the covenants, I am able to get my money back immediately, and you are subject to penalty. Get it? And that's called debt covenants. The loan covenants could be either positive covenants or negative covenants. Positive covenants means things you must do. For example, you have to maintain a minimum accounting standard according to GCAP, which is American accounting standard, or WSB according to Australian accounting standard. You have to maintain a minimum level of working capital, cash flows. You have to buy life insurance for your key employee in case or in extraordinary events, the company are still able to run. You have to spend borrowed money on proved or proven financial projects, not random financial projects. You borrow money from me, you said you want to buy asset A, then you are only able to use my money to buy asset A. You can't use my money to buy asset B. Those are the covenants you have to do, you have to follow. If you breach the covenants, for example, you are using my money to buy asset B. As the bank, I'm able to get your money back, and you are subject to penalty. Negative covenants means things you must not do. You must not do. For example, you can't sell account receivable for cash. If the company do not have enough cash, bankrupted, insolvency. To this end, if the company is in going concern issue of financial distress, for example, they need to pay interest payment in next month. Sometimes the company may do these things stupid, like sell their account receivable at a cheaper price to get some cash to repay interest. That will harm the company in long run, right? And that will harm the bank in long run. So you can't sell account receivable for cash. You can't issue additional debt. And even you do, this debt must be subordinate. If you borrow money from me, and this money is backed up by some assets, you can't issue additional debts. Because if you issue additional debts, in the event of insolvency, I need to share the asset with another party, right? I don't want to. Even you want to issue more debt, okay, subordinated. That debt is ranked after me. Only after I get all my money back, and then it's you. Does this make sense for you? So those are the covenants. And you have to meet your fixed obligation or fixed term obligation. So debt covenants, constraints to borrower, things that you must do and things you must not do to protect the banker. Okay? Up to this stage, any questions? Today, if you borrow money from the bank just for home loan mortgage, you do have loan covenants as well. For example, you have negative covenants, the last one. You have to meet your monthly repayment obligation. isn't it? That is things you must do. If you are unable to meet your monthly repayment obligation, the bank will get their money back by selling your property. Get it? And that's our covenants banks use to protect themselves. Now, determined by at least 4 factors, the cost of debt. Finally, students may be wondering, hey Robert, if today I want to borrow money from the bank will give me a quoted interest rate, right? That is called the cost of using debt, right? Cost of using bank money, interest rate. And then people may be wondering, hey Robert, what are the determinants of the cost of debt? Generally, the cost of debt is determined by 4 factors. The first factor is loan maturity, time. From bank's perspective, the longer the maturity means the longer the term, and then means higher probability of default, higher uncertainty. So the longer you borrow the money, the higher the interest rate. Get it? The longer you borrow money, the higher the interest rate from bank's perspective. Because the longer the maturity, the higher the uncertainty, the higher of the probability that you get default. Makes sense, right? It determined by the size of the loan. Makes sense. There's trade-off between administration costs and the risk exposure to the increase of the loan size. For example, today, if you only borrow $100, it is very easy for you to manage. If you borrow $100,000, it is still hard for you to manage. Even today, you borrow $1 million, it's not hard for you to manage as well because you can simply invest into one property, right? But today, if you borrow 10 million from the bank, which means you have to invest into 10 property. Do you have enough time? Do you have enough time to monitoring, to administrate these 10 property? And that could be a risk. So the loan size increase, the risk increase as well. And of course, the interest increase. The third factor is about you, borrower risk. The greater the risk of default, the higher the rate of the lender will charge. So it's the rate about you. Remember last week I told you guys about credit card example. Don't use high credit card limits. Because at the end of the day, if you want to borrow money from the bank, they will evaluate your risk as a borrower. When they evaluate your risk, they will consider 3 factors. Your existing loan, your credit card limits, and your car loan. Of course, together with your income. If you have higher existing loan from other bank, you have higher credit card limits, the bank will consider you as a higher risk borrower. Because you have higher credit card limits, which means you have the higher probability to spend more money. Does this make sense for you? A bank don't want to gamble on this. That's why later on when you apply credit cards, bank always want to increase your credit card limits. But you should always say no. You do need a credit card, but try to keep the limits as minimum as possible. Because if you keep your limits up to $100,000, from bank's perspective, there is a probability you will just swap $100,000 in one day, right? And you may be able to default. So this is too risky for them. But if your credit card limit only $2,000, even if you spend $2,000 and you are unable to pay credit card, it's not a big deal for them. Does this make sense for you? So that's borrower risk. And of course, depends on your job, depends on your income. If you, for example, are a university lecturer or working in a hospital, the bank will normally classify you at lower risk because they will consider that you make rational investments and your job is relatively stable, right? But if you working in a higher risk sector with higher turnover, for example, you are a property manager, you're selling properties. From bank's perspective, this job is a higher turnover job. Or you are a sales representative. This kind of job is not preferred by the bank. Does this make sense for you? So those are the borrower risk. Of course, finally, is the cost of money. Cost of money means if you want to borrow money from the bank need money from someone else, right? Bank need money from the public, and bank need money from the government. That's how bank have the money, right? The cost of the money makes, the cost of money determines the cost of debt. Because if the bank spend more money in raising capital, they will lend you at a higher rate. Makes sense? Because today, if the demanding of saving increased, banks need money from the public, they increase the saving rate, the lending rate will increase as well, because the cost of the bank get the money increase. Those other factors will affect the cost of debt. Now, of course, you can apply it in practice. You can also apply this in your real life. Think about all those factors. If you want to buy a property, things you need to put in your mind. First of all, maturity is something you might not be able to change, so you probably still go for 30 years. But size of the loan is something that you can control. Just borrow the money that you need, or amount of money that you want. Borrow risk is something that you can control. Before you talk to the bank, before you take to the mortgage, try to cut your credit card limit. Try to repay all your outstanding debts, like car loans or something, make you have better credit. Try to find a stable job for the last 6 months, have good payslip records. And finally, cost of money. Think about market condition. If market condition is good, generally, the cost of debt is very high. Because when market condition is good, everyone wants to invest. No one wants to save money in the bank. The bank need higher cost to attract the investor to save money in the bank. Cost of money increase, they have to lend at a higher rate as well. Does this make sense for you? Any questions? Okay. Now, last few slides. Just give me a second. Corporate long-term debt. Some students used to ask me, "Hey Robert, for corporate, what is a corporate long-term debt and how do we define long-term?" Government long-term, normally 30 year, 20 year, but for corporate it's slightly different. For institutional debt, from a corporate perspective, generally have maturity of 5 to 12 years. Generally, for corporate debt, it will be longer than 1 year, but mature in 5 to 12 years. For corporate, their debt are marketable. For corporate, there's various different kind of corporate bond, and we have examples in the next few slides. Those are the characteristics. You can read it by yourself, and I don't want to go through in the class. For corporate debt, generally speaking, few types. The first one is called debentures. The second one is called subordinate bonds, and then income bonds, and then covered bonds. In short, debentures are bonds that only worth companies can issue, usually secured over property, and that's debenture. Subordinate bonds is the bond that's subordinated, following by a debenture and something else. Income bond is income bond of life insurance policies, only friendly society issue, so not all of the company can issue income bond. Covered bond is secured by direct claims on assets that are owned by the issuer, covered by a property. So all those kind of bond is kind of backed up by assets. And these slides, you can read it for your own interesting. Just let you know that most of the corporate bond, their maturity is between 10 to 30 years. Okay? That's basically everything for this week's topic before we move to the workshop questions. Let's do a quick sum up about what we learned this week. At the very beginning of the class, we talked about valuation principle, how to value a financial asset. The value of the asset is always the present value of all of its future cash flows. As long as you are able to identify its future economic benefits, cash flows, you then work out the present value. That will be the true value of the asset. By applying this principle, we applied this principle on bond valuation to value bond, right? Apply bond valuation to value bond, we realize that, okay, bond will give us two kinds of cash flows, coupon and principal. The coupon payment is an annuity. Principal is a single cash flow at the end of the year. Am I right? To this end, the value of the bond will then be the present value of the annuity together with the present value of the single cash flow. Sum it together. We then talked about the bond, about semi-annual payments. By applying the compounding more frequently than annually idea we learned last week, into this week's topic. Now, we explain the relationship between yield to maturity and coupon rate. If yield to maturity is lower than coupon rate, which means the market is better than your bond. Sorry, yield to maturity is lower than coupon rate, which means the market is not as good as your bond. Your bond is more attractive, you sell it at a premium. If the yield to maturity is better than your bond, which means market is better than your bond, you have to sell it at a cheaper price, discount. Of course, if the market condition and your bond rate are the same, you sell at the same value. We then talked about the relationship between bond price and the interest rate. Interest rate goes up, yield to maturity goes up, bond price decrease. Interest rate goes down, bond price increase. An inverse relationship. Am I right? Most importantly, the longer the maturity, the price of the bond is more sensitive to the movements of interest rate. Right? Bond with longer maturity, its price is more sensitive to the movements up and down of the interest rate, the magnitudes, right? And finally, we talked about term structure between maturity and interest rate. If you only look at the maturity and the interest rate, the longer the time, the higher the interest rate, generally speaking. But sometimes it could be flat. My example, Switzerland. Time will not affect their riskiness at all. Because during the past 100 or even 200 years, we always trust Switzerland's government. Am I right? Because that is the headquarters of the United Nations, and that is the headquarters of all the largest banks. And of course, there's possible of downward sloping. I'll give you the example. In extreme condition, if you already stand in the global financial crisis, as we all know, things can't be worse. Even future, there's uncertainty, but must be good uncertainties. Because you're already at the bottom. You won't be worth, right? Even there's uncertainty in the future, there must be good uncertainty. So the longer the time, the lower the yield to maturity. That's the general relationship. Does this make sense for you? That's basically everything about bond. We then start to talk about characteristics of long-term debt financing. For example, secured, unsecured, public bond, private issued. Finally, I spent some time to explain to you what are the key determinants of cost of debt, interest rates. And by using a practical example, if you want to borrow money from the bank, what are the factors the bank will consider in quoting you an interest rate? If you have a very good job, you are a doctor in the hospital, and you have very low credit card limits, you have no outstanding loan, and you borrow a reasonable amount of money, like $2 million, for buy property, and the market condition is reasonable, you will realize your bank loan interest rate could be really low. Today, it's even around 4%. They may give you 4%. But if you do not have a stable job, you have really high debt outstanding, and you want to borrow money from the bank, there's two options. A, they won't give you the money. B, even if they give you the money, they probably ask for 8%, double the cost of that to a doctor. But that makes sense, isn't it? And that is something that you need to put into consideration. And finally, we describe the types of long-term debt, private issue and public issue. And that's basically everything for this week's topic. Starting from last week, students come to ask me, "Hey Robert, do we need to read the textbook?" My answer is, it's up to you. If you want to read the textbook, please follow my instructions. Those are the parts you need to read. Those are the parts you don't need to read. And you only need to read the part that is covered by the lecture slides. So you can use your lecture slides as a guideline. If you understand what I'm talking about, you don't have to read the textbook. If you want to have further knowledge, you read the textbook accordingly. If I'm talking about bond valuation, you only read bond valuation part. Does this make sense for you? Okay. Let's move to our workshop question and do some practice together. Now, if you do have a pen and paper in front of you, we can do it together. If not, at least you follow what we are talking about. And still not, if you still don't understand, as I told you, please make sure that you are willing to spend some time for practice. Okay, the first question, bond valuation. First of all, before we move to the bond valuation question, okay, this is our bond valuation equation. Before we start to do any bond valuation question, I want you to write down this equation on your workbook or paper or something. So later on, you don't need to refer to your slides for this equation. If you don't have a paper or something with you, make sure that you turn to slides 14 and you have this equation. So we can follow this equation and do it step by step. Okay, take some time. We still have 20 minutes or 30 minutes left. Down? Do you write down the equation? Or at least you turn to the slides, have the equation? Down? Okay, it's in slides, I think it's slide 14, okay? All right. Let's start to do the question and think about it. Now, for this equation here, let me ask you a question. This is a bond equation for an annual coupon rate bond. What about if this bond is a semi-annual coupon bond? What should we do? We divide by C by 2. We divide the interest rate by 2, wherever you have interest rate. And wherever you have N, you times this by 2, right? It's not hard, isn't it? Good. I'm sure that you have the equation in front of you at least. Now let's talk about the question, so we are on the same page. The company has issued 6-year bond that pay $30 interest twice each year. Face value of this bond, 1,000, and offer a yield to maturity 5.5%. How much are the bond worth, and what is the coupon per year? Okay, step by step. First of all, this question is asking bond price. For doing this kind of question, first of all, write down all the important information. The first information I want you to write down, how much is your semi-annual coupon? Is it given? It gives you a coupon payment, but it gives you a semi-annual payment, isn't it? How much is it? Write it down. The semi-annual coupon payment is $30. So this coupon payment, this is already semi-annual coupon payment. It's $30. So this question must be a semi-annual coupon payment question, right? Second question, if your semi-annual coupon payment is $30, how much is your annual coupon payment? $60, right? Face value always 1,000. If your annual coupon payment is $60, how much is your annual coupon rate? Write it down. Annual coupon rate C will be 6%. Right? Okay. Second question. This is a semi-annual coupon question. Do we know annual interest rate? Do we know annual discount rate? Is it given? We have a yield to maturity 5.5%, right? When we do these questions, we need to divide it by 2. So we need to have this in mind. How many years? N? How many years? N?
6 years.
6 years. M, compounding period 2, right? N times M, how many payments? 12. Okay, we have all this information. Let's have it piece by piece, step by step. Are you able to fill in the blanket part? Face value 1,000, N6, coupon payment every 6 months, $30. Yield to maturity, 5.5%. Semi-annual yield to maturity, 5.5% divided by 2. Can you do this? That's what I said. Identify the important information of the question. Any questions about this? How to identify those information? We did it together. Any questions? Okay. Now, how do we work out bond price? Do you still remember I want you to write down the equation? I want you to write down the equation. Now look at the equation. Let's try to plug the number into the equation. In your equation, it is annual coupon, right? But now it is semi-annual coupon payment. So C must be semi-annual coupon. So you put $30 in your equation. Do you agree? In your equation, it is an annual coupon payment equation. But now we are talking about semi-annual. We have M, which is 2. We need to divide all the interest rate, yield to maturity, by 2. Do you agree? Am I right? Yep. So we divide yield to maturity by 2? By 2. In your question, you have n number of payments, you times it by 2. Can you do it? And plug number into the equation, and that's how your equation should look like once you plug number into the equation, this bit here. And that's how your equation should look like, the second step. I don't want you to perform calculation on the seminar, but I want you to reach the second step. I'll give you 2 minutes. Try to reach the second step. Try to plug number into the equation, reach the second step. Don't watch my solution. Try to do it by yourself. See whether you can reach the second step. You don't need to perform the calculation. Okay? Now give me 2 minutes and try to do it. You don't have to perform a calculation, but try to do it. Again, let me repeat, I hate to see this because you guys are master students. But trust me, I've taught over 10,000 students in the past 10 years. I know how to pass the unit. No one knows better than me for this unit. Of course, I'm the one designing your exam paper. But you need practice. Practice. Not watch your computer in front of you. Press the button. You are cheating yourself. Practice. In your exam, you have a pen and paper in front of you and a calculator. You write down the solution. You fail the exam, you fail everything. Practice. Don't be lazy. Okay? You are not fool me, you fool yourself. What happened to me if you fail this unit? I'll see you again next year. Am I right? If you fail it again, I'll see you again next year. But I don't want to see you again in this unit. Spend some time, don't be lazy. Don't assume that you know everything. You know nothing. Are you able to achieve the second step by plug number? Are you able to get this step here? Once you are able to get this step there, then you perform calculation and work on the price. If you are unable to get that step during the class, after class, if you have time, go to library, practice. Okay? Because at that time, you still have the memory. This bit is very important. It's about practice, this unit. All right. We have the coupon rate, we have the bond price, and bond price is $1,025. Question. $1,025, it is a premium bond or discount bond? Premium bond, right? Second question. Semi-annual coupon rate is, or semi-annual coupon payment is $30. Annual coupon payment is $60. So we work out coupon rate 6%, right? Coupon rate 6%. Your yield to maturity, 5.5%. Coupon rate is higher than yield to maturity. Your bond is better than the market. You should sell it at a premium. Your solution confirms this. Do you agree? Up to this stage, any questions? Any questions? Okay. All right. Let's move to the next question, our last question. Again, let's do it together, step by step. The company issued 1,000 face value bond a few years ago with a coupon rate of 7%. So coupon rate 7%, or semi-annually. Coupon rate 7% semi-annually. How much is your annual coupon payment? How much is your annual coupon payment? How can you work out 14? Your coupon rate is 7%. Face value 1,000. How much is your annual coupon payment? 70, right? Coupon rate times par value, 70, right? How much is your semi-annual coupon payment? 35. Good. After the bonds were issued, interest rate fall. Interest rate fall means what? It's good news for us. Our bond is more attractive, isn't it? Because the interest rate fall, our bond is more attractive. Now, with 3 years remaining before they mature, so 3 years left, you now sell your bond at $1,055. So you are able to sell it at this price. The question is asking you the interest rate, yield to maturity. Let's write down the equation and see how the equation looks like. First of all, question step by step, one by one. The first two parts, we work out our coupon payment, $35. Am I right? Now, question is asking your yield to maturity. Again, let's use your bond valuation equation. When you have your bond valuation equation, this is a semi-annual bond valuation equation. You need to divide everything by 2 and times n by 2 in the discount factor. Do you agree? Am I right? Okay. Look at this equation here. This is the equation about semi-annual bond. Do you know the bond price? It's given, right? Do we work out the coupon payments, semi-annual payments? Yes or no? How many years left? How many years left? 3 years, right? Semi-annual payments. So how many payments? 6, right? You plug all the number into the equation. Of course, last term, par value always 1,000. It looks like there's only one unknown variable in the equation, which is yield to maturity, y, right? Do you agree? Do you agree? You plug all the number into the equation, you then reach to this step. Am I right? Now listen carefully. This is very similar to the question last week. Once you reach to that step, without a financial calculator and Excel, you can't solve it. That's why you're lucky. In your exam, I won't ask you to solve yield to maturity. I may ask you to solve coupon, bond price, but not yield to maturity. But still, I put it in practice question because in practice, you may need to solve it. How to solve it? For financial calculator, learn it by yourself. But for Excel, we have the Excel equation here for you to solve it. And that's your Excel equation. And some of the students may also wondering, hey, Robert, if I don't have Excel, don't have financial calculator, don't have a normal calculator, what should I do? Using the trial error method, the keep trying method. You remember? Guessing a rate and keep trying. You guess the rate is too low, try a higher one. Too high, try a lower one. Eventually, you will get a solution. Okay? That's basically everything about this week's lecture. We'll still have one more thing to say, but before we finish, any questions? Any questions? Okay. You will now have your second apply homework for bond today. And also, you have your last homework for time value of money last week. Make sure you do your homework. One student asked me one homework question on Cloud Deacon. I won't answer it because this is your homework, your test. This is the apply homework test. The student asked me, Robert, I don't know how to do this question. Can you teach me? I can't. It is still assessment, okay? You have 3 times to try. I'll give you opportunity for self-directed study, but it's still an assessment. You still need to do it by yourself. And if you don't know how to do it, we'll give you a solution. It's self-explained, all right? And for Applia, for those students, I fully understand we do have students who enrolled late or changed from other units or due to personal issues or whatever things did not attend the first 2 weeks lecture. For those who didn't attend the first 2 weeks lecture, don't be panic. The first things you need to do, go back to home, go to Cloud Deacon website. On the week 1 and week 2 folder, I have 2 recording videos every week. 1 long version, 1 short version, right? The short one is called weekly summary video. My recommendation, watch both weeks summary video first. Give you a general idea about this unit. And then you start to ask me questions. Once you watch all the video, you should be on top of everything for Applia sign-up and other issues. One more thing for Applia. Once you create the account, the Applia work is not in your created account page. You need to open applia.com and go to the small link at the bottom, sign in with Applia to get into there, okay? I'll see you guys next week.
2 hours, 23 minutes. So do we need who the chart to assignment to?
要那个group group.
Yeah, from a group. So
Yes. I'll explain next week. Don't worry about today.
okay, so we don't need who in the form.
No, not yet. I will explain to you about how to sign up. Next week, I will let you know.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
The second assignment for group of 2. Yeah. No, it's group assignment. I will show you next week. It will be launched next week. I will talk about it next week, okay? Yeah. Just click continue. Just click continue. No, here, yeah. That's it. Yeah, view or something. Yeah, that's it.
Just open this one.
It works for you.
How do
No, that's practice.